Hello again. I've noticed an alarming trend lately when visiting museums in London, which I do quite frequently. I'm a bit of a museum buff. This is for exhibits to be covered up or removed because they do not fit in with the latest fads in political ideas. Obviously, one expects museums to update their displays as new developments are made in science or historical discoveries affect what is known of the past. But this isn't at all what I'm talking about. To give a simple example, your biological sex is determined according to X and Y chromosomes. That means that with very few exceptions, people that are so-called intersex or hermaphrodite, for example, XX chromosomes means that you will have a female body and XY chromosomes mean that you'll have a male body. This is simply a matter of biology, and no discoveries in the field of biology in recent years have altered this fact. Until 5 years ago, the Science Museum in London had an information panel which said your X and Y chromosomes define your biological sex, which is absolutely and undeniably true. Following an organised campaign by transsexual militants, which involved writing lots of letters and sending emails, the museum was persuaded to remove this display. In other words, a museum devoted to science was pressured into concealing the truth about genetics by a political campaign. Can anybody see what might be wrong with that? At the Science Museum also, there was a little game designed to test if your brain is more male or female. That's also been removed recently because some people claimed it was offensive. It's not. As it happens, women tend to be better at matching colours than men. It's just one of those things. That was one of the little tests. Men tend to be better at manipulating objects spatially, in their minds. There's no harm in all this. It's simply related to what is actually known about men and women's brains. But, of course, a bunch of transsexuals took offence, and so that's been removed as well. A section in a gallery there labelled boy or girl is also being updated because complaints were made that this does not reflect the current craze for non-binary people. This is not the Science Museum changing exhibits because the science behind them is outdated. They are doing it because of a fashionable political trend. They have a display there, or they did have a display relating to DNA and ancient human lineage. That's now been boarded up and a sign placed on the board saying that the museum is to address its non-inclusive narrative, which is probably code for trying to put more black people in the display. None of this has anything at all to do with science. I said before that when we allow ideology to triumph over science, then we're in terrible trouble. It happened in Nazi Germany when anybody that believed that E equals MC squared must be an enemy of the German people because the equation had been formulated by Einstein, who was a Jew. In Soviet Russia, the mad idea of Lysenkoism was endorsed by Stalin, and anybody who believed in genes or genetics ran the risk of being sent to a concentration camp, because this view ran counter to the tenets of dialectical materialism as supported by Stalin and Lysenko. The problem is that ideology and politics should be based on science, not the other way round. In Stalin's Russia, people didn't dare discuss the very concept of genetics freely. And now Britain's National Museum devoted to science feels the same way about X and Y chromosomes. The parallel is exact. In both cases, scientific facts relating to genetics must not be spoken out loud for fear of upsetting this or that politically motivated belief. Much the same thing is happening now at the National Maritime Museum in Greenwich, which is, or at least should be, concerned with the history of Britain and the sea. In the gallery which they set up in 2007 about slavery, there is now a big sign in which the museum apologises because black voices are not well represented in this space. It's absolute nonsense in the first place because there are accounts of slave revolts and various other things in the display. The museums say that they are actioning change to combat inequality. Is this the role of a museum devoted to history? We ask ourselves. Why should they be actioning change to combat inequality? That sounds to me like a political message. This business has barely got off the ground yet. A lot of it was motivated, of course, by the Black Lives Matter disturbances in 2020, which led to the Jeffrey Museum in London being renamed the Museum of the Home as Jeffrey himself was cancelled. We're going to be seeing far more of this in the future, and I can see that a lot of displays and exhibitions in our museums are simply going to be thrown in a skip because they offend certain political views which are becoming increasingly held by people.